Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Cooking with Dr. Frey. So you know how I like those simple one-pot meals, and I told you that we'd get back to them? What I like even more is that with this one-pot meal, you can make it the way I'm just going to make it today, and you could also use it to fill a taco recipe, or a burrito recipe, or something like that. And one day I will teach you how to make taco shells out of Parmesan cheese, because they're delicious, and they don't have any carbohydrates in them, they're amazing. But you could also use sort of like cauliflower tortillas. You can use things like that to make this into a more Mexican meal. What I'm gonna do is just make it a Mexican regular meal. And it's sort of the end of the week, so it's kind of like I'm sort of out of vegetables and I'm sort of out of a lot of things. But what I like to do is usually keep a few things in the freezer. So I'm gonna use the riced cauliflower from the freezer instead of doing it myself. And I'm also gonna use some frozen peas, which, you know what I feel about frozen vegetables, but it's always nice to have something that you can home to, especially sort of in times like this when you don't always just want to run to the store or do anything like that. So here we go. This is going to be another one of those simple one skillet meals. You don't have to have it. You do not have to have a cast iron skillet. You can use whatever skillet you want. But we're going to start with very simple things. This is basil that I've been growing in my windowsill that we're going to throw on top at the very end. I'm going to use chicken, onion, jalapeno to make it nice and spicy, garlic to also give it that nice little pungent flavor. And you know the garlic is going to have allicin, so it's also antibacterial, it's antiviral properties, so it's a good antioxidant. And we're going to use jalapeno again. But let me just get started doing it. So it's really going to be the riced cauliflower, onion, jalapeno, garlic, and then I'm going to throw some hot sauce in at the end and some basil on the top so that so the basil will get warm as we're serving the meal. So this is going to be really simple. I may even add a little chili powder because you know how I feel about adding different colors, and that's red. And so we have red, green, white, and then we have the protein as chicken. So let's get started. The chicken doesn't have to go in right away, so what we'll do is we'll get the garlic ready first because the garlic and the onions are going to cook first. So we're just going to cut up this onion, typical sort of, cut it however way you want. Like I said, I'm a very basic sort of person when it comes to cooking. I just like it easy, simple. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to taste good. And when you have the right ingredients, everything tastes good. So now what most people would do, most people would put the oil in the bottom of the pan. And I've gotten this question, so I'm going to just tell everybody else. Most people will put oil in the bottom of the pan first and let it get a little warm before adding the vegetables. But because I don't ever cook by recipe, I never know how much oil I'm going to need. And yes, the onions are stinging my eyes. I apologize for that. So that's why I put the oil in after I put the vegetables in and see how much I actually need. Okay, so then we're going to get the garlic. I like lots of garlic. So I'm gonna use this whole head of garlic, why not? It's been sitting in my refrigerator, I might as well use it. So we're gonna do that. And if you remember how I like to get the garlic cloves off, or how to get the skin off garlic, because it's really easy. People think it's a pain in the neck, but it's really not. I'm gonna get my garlic pressed right here. I'm gonna take each clove and you kind of hold because I'm doing it not on the countertop but on the stove, you've got to hold the cutting board down, and then I'm just go bam, and then the skin comes right off, and then I just pour this right into the pan. Really super easy. As you can see now, I've chopped up all the garlic and the onion, so what we're going to do is then chop up the jalapeno. Now a lot of people have also asked why I wear ties on this. Well, for two reasons. One, I haven't worn a tie since the pandemic started, so I haven't worn a tie since March. And the second reason is, ties are really useful. You can wash your hands on them. You could use it to wash your mouth. So and that's actually the history of ties. Ties were not meant to sort of be a fashion statement for men. They were sort of a way to cover what you were wearing underneath. It's almost like when people put napkins under there. Yes, that's my dog choking again, as usual. That's what you hear in the background. And so ties are really quite convenient. So I'm going to just chop up these jalapenos. They're a little thick, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them in half. on top of that. If you leave the seeds in, it will be hotter. If you want to take the seeds out, then it'll be less hot. That's how most peppers work, and jalapenos especially work that way. But it'll give it a nice little Mexican flair. And then after this, after we get the jalapenos in here, what we're gonna do is start to cook them. Because these need to sort of brown up a little bit. They need to sweat, basically, is what we call them. So we're gonna let these vegetables sweat for a minute. What we're gonna do is use my favorite. We're gonna pour some macadamia nut oil in here. And the reason the pan isn't so full is because the cauliflower is gonna fill this all up. And then so will the peas, and they're frozen. And I know you don't get as much nutrients from, or phytonutrients or anything from frozen vegetables, but like I said, it's Friday night, I'm tired, it's a pandemic, who wants to go to a store? So we're gonna just leave it at that. So I'm gonna turn this on to sort of probably like, oh, you know what, we'll add salt. I'm gonna turn this on to medium. Since it's my wok setting, I'm gonna turn it on sort of medium, because this is a pretty powerful burner. Then I'm gonna add salt, because you know how I love salt and how important salt is to our bodies. I can't tell you how many patients have come in salt deficient and salt depleted, feeling dizzy and tired and nauseous, and it's all because their sodium levels are so low. So that's important. I think what we'll do is we'll throw in a little, let's see, we have salt, we have jalapeno, maybe a little red pepper. Now, I know this looks funny and it's gigantic, but I bought all of this chili powder when I was in India last, because that's where you get, I mean, that's where most of our spices come anyway, you know, from India and places like that. And India was known as the spice continent. So that's where I like to get my spices, because they're so fresh and they're so delicious. And better yet, they've not been radiated like every spice in America gets radiated before it's allowed to be imported. It gets radiated. So you're eating radiated food. Yet another example of our wonderful country's food supply. So I'm just gonna add in a little bit. You can add more if you want it hotter, you can add less, whatever you wanna do. Because at the end of the day, I'm gonna add a little hot sauce with vinegar. The other thing you could also do to a dish like this is throw in some stock. You know, some sort of, like I have fish stock in the freezer, I have chicken stock in the freezer, I have beef stock in the freezer, but it just seemed like a lot. It's been a long week, who needs that nonsense? So we're just gonna put this on. We're gonna let this cook for a little bit. In the meantime, we're gonna get the chicken ready. So the chicken is ready to go in. And you know, it's white meat chicken, so chicken does not take that long to cook. And if you overcook it, it's gonna just be dry and awful. So I'm gonna put that in when I put the cauliflower in. And the cauliflower, when it's frozen, takes about 7 minutes. So all this is gonna take is about 7 minutes to cook. The dicing took about 10 minutes to cook. This will, in about 5 minutes, this will be ready to go. And then we will be 7 minutes away from dinner. So there's nothing easier than that. You can chop up the chicken any way you like. I like to keep it in larger chunks so that it stays moister. If you're someone who likes their chicken on the dry side, just chop it a little differently. I mean, like I said, this is a one skillet meal. You can make it however you want. And truly, you could change the protein from chicken to pork to tofu if you want to be vegan, because right now what's in there is vegan. It's macadamia nut oil, onion, jalapeno, and garlic, completely vegan. So if you want to make the meal vegan, just switch out the protein to a vegetarian source of protein. Or if you want to not be vegetarian, you can just, or vegan, and you could change this to pork, to beef, to whatever you might happen to have in the refrigerator that day. That's the beauty of cooking, is that you don't, whatever's in the house works. You just throw together. I mean, who are you trying to impress? None of us are Danny Below. None of us are all these famous chefs, so why do we even try? And by the time I make this meal, it'll be easier than having to have ordered it in and wait for it, and having to have it contactless delivered and thrown in my elevator, and it's just not worth it. We all have the ability to cook simply, because that's all we need. And because this, I can't tell you how good it smells. I wish, do anybody of you remember that scratch and sniff? Like way back, I think it was in the early 80s, maybe late 70s, and I'm dating myself terribly. But it was scratch and sniff where the whatever was on screen, you could scratch it and smell what was going on. I think it was a John Waters movie that was the first person to do that. And this is just amazing. I hope you guys can see this because the color, it's got such intense flavor, I can't even be that close to it. The smell's amazing. So I'm gonna turn it up a little bit because now I can pay attention to it. And you just want to open up the onions, however you want to do it. Again, this is simple. You know, I grew up on simple peasant cooking. You know, simple Sicilian, Italian, Southern Italian peasant cooking. You just throw food in a pot and you make it good. And it all turns out good. You don't have to worry about it. I think way too many people are worried about following recipes exactly and all of that. When you really don't have to. Just whatever ingredients you have in the house, throw it in the pan. It all works. This smells so amazing, I can't tell you. It's going to make my eyes start watering. So we're just going to let this cook for another minute or two, and we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so now this is cooked down a little bit. The onions are starting to sweat. The garlic smells amazing, the jalapenos, but you don't want to overcook it because you want things to be crunchy. So I'm going to throw in the chicken now. I'm going to throw in the chicken. And the chicken will give off moisture, so that's why we'll add a little bit of moisture. If you didn't want that, you could always, this is the step where you throw the stock in if you wanted, to give it a little more thicker flavor. I'm gonna go into my freezer, and we're gonna get the cauliflower, and we're gonna get the rice. And we're gonna throw the cauliflower in, because that takes 7 minutes to cook. And by that time, so will the chicken be cooked. And then we'll sort of throw the peas in for 2 minutes, sort of just stirring it in, letting them warm up, because peas don't take long to thaw. So it's just organic, rice, cauliflower. I happen to get mine from Whole Foods. You can get it from wherever you want. At this point, I will turn the heat down because this is the wok burner, and I don't want it to overcook. And then what I'm going to do, and I thought I had taken it out, but I didn't, is I'm just going to make sure this is just stirred in. Everything sort of moves around. And don't be afraid if things stick to the bottom or burn a little bit, because that's a great way of making the sauce at the end. Where you just pour a little hot water in here and just reduce the drippings that are in there. So I'm going to cover this because it'll make its own water for just a minute. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it for about 7 minutes, so I don't think you need to watch this part. Okay, we're 6 minutes into the cauliflower. Let's see what it looks like. The reason I covered it is because then you'll get the moisture from the food. And look at that. It's all the moisture's coming together, all the colors coming together, the flavors are coming together. It smells amazing. I can't tell you how good this smells. But now that what we're going to now do in part 2 is we'll throw frozen peas in. Again, I know it's frozen food. Don't kill me, don't yell at me, don't give me nasty comments on Instagram. But it's still good for you. It's better than having no vegetables. Tomorrow is the farmer's market. I promise you next time I do this, we'll have real vegetables. And so you just want to like cut these, you know, get them unfrozen a little bit. And then what I'm also going to do at this juncture is pour in some hot sauce. You can pour in whatever hot sauce you want. I love spicy food. This is not my favorite hot sauce, but it will have to do, because all of my favorite hot sauces come from countries we can no longer travel to, and I've used it all up. So at some point that will all go away, but you have to learn how to improvise when you're cooking. That is rule number 1. Because that's the only way you're ever going to get a meal that works, is you just improvise. You know, part of me spent a lot of time in the Caribbean. And it was a small little Caribbean island. And you never went to the grocery store thinking, I'm going to have X for dinner. You would go to the grocery store and see what they had and what the ship had brought in that day. So that's how my mother taught me how to cook in a very improvisational way. So it's quite good. And then you know who else taught me something really fun about cooking is Julia Child. It's always nice to have a cocktail when you're cooking, especially on Friday night. So cheers to Julia Child. Not that I could ever put myself in the same ballpark as her, but I can drink as well as her. Cheers. All right, so let's see how this is doing because we're almost done and I'm starving. I'm gonna just turn up the heat a little bit. Just turn it up a little bit so that we can get everything to start searing together again nicely, because now that everything's defrosted, you wouldn't have to do this step if you were using real vegetables, because the real vegetables would not need to defrost before you turned up the heat to crisp them. So now what I'm gonna do is just turn up the heat to crisp everything. And it may not be enough hot sauce, it may be enough hot sauce, but you can always add more at the end. It's no big deal. Or you can always add it up to your own plate, because if you're cooking for a bunch of people, some people may not like it hot, some people may like it less spicy. So it's just easier to let people, I have found, to do it on their own. So I'm just going to turn this up a bit, and then we will have the finished product very, very soon. I can't wait. You know what else would be good in here that I wish I had, but I used last night, was mushrooms. Mushrooms would be really good in this situation. But again, so imagine this is a Mexican meal which you can eat just as is, which I'm going to do out of a plate. But imagine taking this into either, Parmesan cheese tortillas that you made, and you just throw this in. You have a nice crunchy, salty part of that. You can also, again, like I said at the beginning of this, use a lot of those low-carb tortillas that are great ones made out of rice. If you're not worried about your weight, there's great ones made out of lentil flour, which are really delicious. I love the ones made out of lentil flour. They're indigenous in India, and I use them constantly. They're really good. But tonight we're just going to keep it very simple, very low-carb, very real. And then at the very end of this is we're going to throw a little bit of basil, homegrown basil that is. And so I'm going to take my basil plant that has been growing in my windowsill. You know what? I'm not going to put it on until this is cooked, because these will wilt too much. And it's sort of the end of the season for my basil, which smells outrageous, by the way. And my basil isn't going to last much longer, but that's okay. Summer's almost over. Well, summer is over officially, but the warm weather in many parts of our country is still around and alive and kicking. But I think I'm going to save this because it just is too good to let it get wasted and be denatured by the heat. All right. Well, you know what? I think this is done. So let's plate this. Put this in a plate. I'll show you how I plate it. At the end, sometimes I turn it up really super high for just like 30 seconds, and it just crisps everything up really nicely. Again, just keep stirring it so you don't get, again, if you're using a beautifully well-seasoned skillet like this, you're not going to have any problem because nothing will stick to it. But this is how I would serve it. So I'm just going to take it off. Let me shut the gas off. And because this is a cast iron skillet, what I'm going to do is just move this off the heat because it will continue to cook. And then I'm going to take that, as you can see, and then I'm just going to literally just throw a bunch of, cut up a piece, just crudely cut them up. It's for flavor. It is not for presentation or show. One day I will make you a really beautiful meal, but I don't think my show is about making beautiful meals. You've got the Food Network for this. My show is about how to cook and survive and do it yourself and make it easy. So on that note, thank you for tuning in, and I'm going to get started eating because I am starving. Enjoy.